Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Plan It Your Way. And today I'm going to be talking about leveraging mistakes to create a great business plan. Here's what we're going to go through today. First, we're going to go through the most common mistakes that people learn from their previous employer or experience they've had in their professional life. I'm going to translate that into the learnings you can take into creating your business plan. I'm going to challenge a few assumptions and bust some myths about some of these mistakes, show you where that fits into your written business plan, and then let you know how to contact me if you need any help writing your plan. First, here's the three most common mistakes I hear about when I'm helping somebody write their business plan. I say, what would you like to not repeat from things that you've experienced in your life? So number one is management experience. And people might say something like, I'm not going to be that toxic boss that taught me exactly what not to do with my team. The second one is, I learned a lot. I learned about what it's like to be in a corporatized environment, and there's a big gap in how care is delivered. It was way over standardized, so I don't want to do that. I learned a lot about that market insight. I have a couple of asterisks on this one because we're going to talk about that corporatized approach, and there are some learnings that you should bring to your business plan when it comes to that structure. And the third is risk mitigation. And this is a big takeaway that people really should look at when they're building their own business plan. I've already made these mistakes on somebody else's dime, and here's how I'm going to avoid them. This is a big one. I can't wait to dive into that one a little bit further. But first, let's tackle that management experience. All right, within management experience, there's a few lessons that are most commonly learned. First is micromanagement, and that it kills morale and productivity. So what do I hear people wanting to do with that? They want to hire good people, train them, and then trust them to do their jobs. What gets in the way of that? Well, what truly gets in the way of that is relying on learned experiences. So to really do that, it's not enough to write it down in your business plan. You have to be very intentional about making sure you don't fall back on what you've learned in your professional life as you move forward with actually executing your business plan. This is one of those reasons I recommend that you look at your business plan and possibly even rewrite it 1 year into business, and then every 1 to 3 years sequentially throughout the course of your business, and at least 3 years before you plan to exit your business. Because these little things, these lessons we're going to talk about can sneak in and they can sneak up on you, and you can actually create the same mistakes that you were trying to avoid if you're not careful about it. So what's lesson number two in the management experience? Poor communication that creates chaos and resentment. This is actually a trap a lot of small business owners fall into. It's when the job becomes a job and it becomes a grind, and it's that feeling that the clock never stops, can't ever take a break, and it just starts feeling like chaos. Well, what can you do about it? You can write into your plan that you're going to establish some clear expectations and consistent communication channels. And then when you open your business and you start running it, you hold yourself accountable to doing that, and you check in on the progress of that by looking back at your plan and looking at what you said you would do in the execution of the management of your business. And lesson number three, lack of recognition and investment in people. This is a pretty leading reason why people want to leave their current employment experience and why they want to open their own business. And I will say this is an area that I would caution people to get overly idealistic. It's a very idealistic concept to want to give raises whenever you want to give raises, or to give awards or prizes or gifts whenever you want to do that. However, all of those things have a direct relationship to how the business is doing financially and operationally. And there's also some direct relationships to actual performance management and performance psychology in that. Certainly never a good idea to just give things without there being a really good equal relationship between the person who's performing the job and the person who's overseeing the job. And there just really has to be a good symbiotic relationship there. So as you consider this lesson number 3, really do what you say you're going to do there, which is most people say they want to build a culture where people feel valued, and that value goes far beyond what they're doing from a productivity standpoint, that it's just a great place to work, somewhere people want to come work. And this one is really difficult to hold yourself accountable to. So as we sum up management experience here, this is the one that when we write it into the plan, this is a part that people tend to heal from wounds of their past and set the stage for the type of employer that they'd like to be. But when you go to open your business and run your business and hire employees and go through your first experiences of possibly having to do some interventions on some behaviors that weren't so great, or possibly make decisions between great employees on who's going to get a promotion, maybe go through your first recessionary experiences, not being able to give raises, or if you have the unfortunate experience of maybe the economy is really not doing well and you have to downsize your team, that's when all of these management experience ideals get tested. So please think about these moments, and when you write them into your business plan, as something you can check back in on and rewrite as your business matures, and rewrite that playbook and expand the playbook based on who you become in this business as well, because leaders and entrepreneurs evolve as well within their own businesses, and your perspective changes throughout the years. So give yourself room and latitude to create your ideal and then grow within the business that you create and establish new normals as you go along and create a new playbook along the road. So second, market insight. And I have lots of asterisks here because these are not all bad. Corporate prioritizes efficiency over relationships. This is lesson number 1, right? So what I hear people say that they'd like to do is to in turn, build relationships that turn clients into loyal advocates. That sounds fantastic. Let's go back to the first learning of management. Where do I find that a lot of companies struggle operationally, financially, operationally? Well, a lot of times it's in how people are utilized within the business. It's in process flow. So what do a lot of corporatized environments do? They try to force process flows or design process flows that hyper utilize people in a way that it cuts those expenses down. Now, are they always well explained? No. Is that why they're sometimes not well received? Yes. Sometimes it can feel very, very forced, and people lose their agency and how they feel like they're executing these highly efficient systems. Often people feel like they're so efficient that they're being underpaid for the immense amount of output they're doing within short periods of time. And that is not a great feeling to create amongst a team, particularly in a small business. However, if you can find the happy medium between treating your people fairly and designing very efficient systems, you can both operationally run your business well, treat your people well, and prioritize efficiency. Those things, when combined, have both financially good outcomes for your business and great people outcomes as well, and great client outcomes. So lesson number 1 is really about learning from those efficiency messages. And how is the efficiency messaged, and why did it feel bad, and how can you do that differently within your own business? Lesson number 2, decision making is slow and disconnected from local needs. Now, this truly is a learning, and this is something that happens in big companies. What I hear a lot of people would like to do is create that ability to pivot based on what's actually working at your local business. Now, let's keep in mind that when big companies are making businesses, they're making decisions. Often they're making decisions based on many, many locations at once and many departments at once. And sometimes they're making decisions based on some regulations and insurances, and there's lots of other factors involved that go beyond a singular location, which is why sometimes those decisions can move very, very slowly. I had a mentor once tell me that a small business is like driving a speedboat, where a very big business is like driving a barge or a cruise ship. And that's a great analogy because that is kind of exactly what it's like. So if you'd like to create the speedboat in your small business, you just have to make sure that you have the decision-making levers in place to make sure you're making good short-term decisions and not just knee-jerk short-term decisions. Lesson number 3, policies create friction points that drive customers away. So what I hear small business owners would like to do is build a culture of common sense policies that leave a good amount of room for some human judgment. So here's another one we're going to put an asterisk. SOPs are not all a bad thing, particularly when it comes to compliance. If you're doing something that's in a regulated area of your business, which anything that has, cleaning protocols, drug logging protocols, medical regulatory protocols, anything where documentation can be reported to the state, where licensing is attached to the state, it's really not a bad idea to have some standard operating procedures or policies written down, because you need to keep everybody on the same page in areas that can actually legally, financially, operationally impact the business or any area of the business where you can get inspected. So those policies are not bad. Now, I think we know the policies we're talking about, and these are the policies that kind of unnecessarily create friction. Now, those are the ones as a small business owner that you can leave the room for the common sense and the human touch. And that's why it's another good idea to rewrite your business plan every 1 to 3 years, because as your business grows and flexes, you start to understand who should weigh in on what documents actually need to exist, what needs to be updated, what's outdated, what rules have changed, and where are we maybe a little disorganized where we could use a document to keep us all on the same page. Because there certainly are environments that are on the opposite end of this spectrum that feel like they don't have enough documents and they'd like to be more organized. So take all that in mind. This market insight piece, sometimes it's the messaging of how it got to you and not necessarily the thing itself. There's a lot to be learned from highly organized environments, and there's a lot to be learned about how decisions are made, and they're not necessarily all bad. So I would encourage you to dig into those thoughts and maybe do some reverse interviewing of some of the people that were in those systems with you to see some of the challenges that existed there, and it might change your perspective. Next is risk mitigation. So lesson number 1, cash flow is king. Profitability on paper means nothing without liquidity. I can't stress this one enough for small business. Be very conservative with your revenue projections. This is something that I very personally understand, having been a small business owner, entrepreneur, and also working as an executive in a large company. The concept of EBITDA and value and projected value is very, very different in those two environments. And what happens when you can accumulate debt or show value, and how you can build excitement on your team on how well your company is doing is dramatically different in those two different environments. So as a small business, you really want to work as much as possible in the actual reality of what you have. And you should work very closely with your accountant and the people that know how much cash you have and how liquid you are and what debt you should accumulate to buy equipment and actually work out those return on investment with the different things that you're willing to accumulate debt for. And you should not accumulate debt in the same way that large companies do, because you might not have the same ways to get out of that debt or to turn that debt like large companies do. So can't emphasize lesson one enough. If you're coming from a very large company to open a small business, you have to shift your lens of thinking as you do that and manage the perception of cash flow and liquidity and value differently. Lesson number two, overhead creep kills businesses. Every fixed cost is a permanent anchor. This is another one with business that can be a little bit tricky for small businesses. And we live in a heavily subscription environment where every system has a little monthly grab or a quarterly grab or an annual grab. All of these things are grabbing at a particular portion of your revenue. And you don't want to assume, you don't want to make a lot of assumptions that that revenue is going to be there. So particularly when you're opening a business, you open with the philosophy that you're going to produce the revenue before the upgrade happens. Right? So you don't want to over upgrade your business before you get to the point you can afford that upgrade. So that comes in the form of essential items during construction versus highly upgraded items during construction. This comes in the form of how many computers you put in, the upgrades on software that potentially could be delayed and come later, the types of uniforms that you pick, and really making some decisions about what actually creates value for the client versus a perceived luxury feel and value that you might not have the revenue to support when you're first opening or during times of economic strain. Lesson number three, revenue assumptions are always optimistic, plan for reality, not best case scenarios. So this should be milestone-based spending, and you should not spend based on projected revenue. And this is very related to number two. So in lesson number two, we talked about not accumulating overhead too quickly. Lesson number three, we're kind of doing the opposite of that, where we're saying don't spend the revenue before it happens. So it's same kind of concept, but you're looking at it through just a slightly different lens. We want to make sure that when you're making your revenue projections that you're doing a low, a mid, and a high, and that you're not doing all best case scenario. In fact, if you talk to banks, they would prefer you don't ever put 100% anything on paper because that's just not very realistic at all. Markets shift, economics conditions shift, consumer spending shifts. So if you're projecting past 70% of what ideal looks like, you're probably over projecting in general, but you should have a couple of different understandings of where those numbers can go. And going back to lesson number two, if you have a couple of different understandings of where those numbers can go, you should also have a couple of different understandings that if things do get tight or get bad, where are the areas I'm willing to sacrifice or cut to keep my business healthy in those kind of situations, because that's natural, that's normal. Economies shift over the course of owning a business. So now let's challenge some common myths and assumptions when it comes to what people believe about business planning in general and when it comes to mistakes and the relationship to writing a business plan. So first, we're going to bring it right back to what I was just talking about with these projections. So there's a belief sometimes that banks want to see aggressive growth and they want to see nothing but success written on paper. And the reality is that banks have a lot of data that they work with. They already know that it's very unrealistic for a business to be overly optimistic. They already know that it sometimes happens that a business opens and they go crazy and they way outdo their projections and they way outdo what anybody thought they would do. But generally speaking, they already know that what kind of an average outcome looks like. And they want to know that you know that. They want to know that you understand what reality looks like and that you're not living in a land of overbuilt assumptions, because your life and your ability to repay the loan and support your own household depends on you living in a reality-based world of projections and assumptions. The next common belief is I need to hide my career mistakes or job hopping because it makes me look unstable. So here's the reality. You should tell the truth. First, because a lot of those things are actually on your credit report, and you can see when people have reported to different jobs because you would have filed tax returns and like that shows up. So it's not as hideable as maybe you think it is. So it's a slightly dishonest to do that. Also, the other reason is that there could have been like really good reasons to switching jobs. And I think that as an entrepreneur, you need to recognize that you are going to have to make a lot of hard decisions. You're going to have to make a lot of hard pivots and tough moves, and banks want to see that. The people you're working with want to see that you're willing to make a tough decision and that you're willing to learn from your lessons and you're willing to do what's necessary to keep moving forward. And sometimes that means just making changes. And so don't be ashamed of those stories. If you moved from job to job because of a situation that didn't fit your needs, or there's an ethical issue or some other issue, or it wasn't financially viable, that's a story worth telling. And you should not be ashamed of that story. The next one is to compete with corporate chains, I need to match their efficiency and scale from day one. This is a tough one, and this is a very common belief. And I see sometimes people wanting to replicate some of those philosophies in their business plan, and it starts to create a divide between what I can tell is their actual belief in how they want to run their business and what they think a franchise might do or a corporate chain might do, or what they believe somebody wants to see on a piece of paper. So here's the reality. The reality is that many businesses actually have very similar core offerings and very similar product and service lines. The differentiator is in how that service or product is delivered to the customer. So the advantage is actually being a little bit different. And there's really not a big advantage of trying to go big really quickly and right out of the gate. Customers choose small businesses because they want that personalized service, they want the flexibility, and they like that local connection. And those are sometimes things they can't get from other methods of business, and particularly things that are what people would consider traditionally corporatized or over logoed or lack that personal touch. So you should not feel like you have to do that in your business plan. You should stay true to how you feel like your unique value proposition is within your service and product offering, understanding that there's a high likelihood that other people are offering similar products and services, and that the way you're choosing to offer it is what differentiates you in your market. The next one is a common belief that a strong business plan focuses on what I'll do right and not what could go wrong. So actually, and the operations section is a great place to start mapping this out, is having some risk mitigation in there, like in your compliance identification and the legalities that you need to follow, and acknowledging that you see where there are potential potholes to fall into and that you're prepared for that, having a schedule of checking in on those items to make sure that you would be prepared for any inspections, prepared to train your staff to handle those things. That's great, because that shows that you're going to be prepared for the things that a lot of times get avoided. And it also shows that you're not being idealistic about a business that might actually have some complexities to it. The next one is the common belief that you need to spend big on location, equipment, and staff to look credible and attract customers. So we already talked about how overhead creep kills more businesses than underinvestment. A lean approach to starting actually and focusing on your revenue and operations, it really demonstrates your financial commitment to your business. And over investing in things like luxury uniforms versus maybe something that does just the same thing functionally and is logoed and gets you out of the gate with that common look and feel, but didn't maybe was 20 or 30% less expensive. It can show that financial discipline to build the trust you need to operationally grow your business towards being able to potentially upgrade to those things later. I mean, and you can apply that concept across the board to the things that you choose to open with for your business. So overspending is not a sign of strength, and it's not a sign of business opulence. It can be actually a sign of weakness, and it can be a sign that you believe that those things are what will drive value within your business, when really what will drive value within your business is your ability to attract and retain a customer. You might be able to attract customers with some flashy, shiny things, but keeping them happens through your service and how you deliver your product and your service. So where does all this fit into your plan? Kind of everywhere. Everything that we covered today fits across the entire spectrum of your plan, because everything that you would have learned in your professional life should apply somewhere, and not from the perspective of everything you were exposed to was wrong. In fact, you should really look at a very balanced approach, like all the pros and cons of all the different environments you were exposed to, the types of leaders you were exposed to, the scenarios where people course corrected and you admired that, or the scenarios where people maybe didn't course correct quickly enough, and maybe realistically think about how would I have done that differently, or how will I do that differently in my own small business. So as you go through the business planning process, this is why it's so important to not just focus on numbers and not just focus on what is the traditional business logistics and terminology at every stage. It's so vitally important that you connect with the heart of how you will run your business and who you are in your business, because every mistake and every lesson that you would have learned along your professional journey, and by extension, everybody that you hire, everybody you bring into your business, that is all going to impact your business and your business plan throughout the entirety of its journey. So I would encourage you that anytime you bring in a senior leader that's going to have significant influence on your company and is going to be there for a while, it's a good time to consider possibly rewriting a business plan or having them do it from their perspective to see what they're going to bring to the table. Or do this every 3 years so that you can really get a good grasp on how your business has evolved or changed, or if you're learning from the mistakes of the past and applying that to the future of your business. If you'd like to work with me on your business plan, I would be happy to. When a business is already open, I sometimes refer to that as a playbook. If you just want to schedule time so that we can talk through where you're at now, that's great. I love to hear about people's businesses. You can go to my website, smallbusiness-dreams.com. I have some questionnaires there, some resources. I have some speaking topics. I'm happy to do webinars or podcasts or whatever you'd like to help your business grow, or your group or organization. You're welcome to reach out to me at the contact information on the screen. And you can expect that I will always be very transparent with you at every step. You drive the speed of the engagement. I move at your pace, and I dedicate to not rushing you through this process. I genuinely support this process because I have been where you are. And because I've been where you are, I'm going to ask you some questions that will challenge you a little bit and spark some interesting conversations. And hopefully we explore some cool strategic concepts together in a way that engages you in having a business plan that really feels like you. Thanks for joining today, and I look forward to hearing from you. And I hope that you turn your business planning mistakes into your business planning fortune in your near future.